Okay, so this is our video number 5 in VBA series, and in this video we are going to talk about why the code is too slow, and we are also going to give some tips on how to improve the efficiency. Okay, so the main reason of why your code is probably slow is because that you are trying to have an interaction between workbook and VBA. That means if you go to this VBA, right? So for example, if you write a simple code like this, sub, and then we call it as EX. Okay, and what we are trying to do is, let me put comment first, write 1 to 10,000 in column A, right? So in this case, what we are trying to do is we can do something like this. For loop, we talked about this in the previous video, and we pass the value into the workbook, right? So we say worksheet ex1. So basically, if you go to this Excel file, ex1 is here. So this is the Excel file. Let me delete everything. Worksheet name is ex1. Okay, so we want to paste all the numbers in column A here. Then you will have worksheets ex1.cls cells and then I1, right? So row number I, column number 1 equal to the value of 1, the value of I, and then you can run the code, right? So F5 to run the code, and then everything done, you go back to Excel, you will see that you have 1 to 10,000. So that is how you pass the value. This is one way, right? So what happened with, or what is the issue with this thing is that you see when I is equal to 1 until 10,000, so you are actually passing the value one by one. So when I is 1, you say, okay, I pass the value 1 to this worksheet cell 1 1, that means cell A1, right? When I is equal to 2, I pass the value again. So you are actually doing something like this. It's like the alternate tab changing window. From here back to here, I tap a 1, and then go back here again, I run this line again. Okay, now I have a 2, go back here, I tap a 2. So I go back here, I read, oh, it's a 3, then I tap a 3. So I repeat this thing, alternate tab like this until 10,000. So 10,000 times, and eventually you get one whole column here, right? So this way of doing is not so efficient because you keep changing the window between Excel and VBA. You go from spreadsheet to VBA back to spreadsheet. So this is not efficient, and this is a very common reason why our code is slow. Okay, so this is the main reason. One of the way to tackle this thing is that you actually write everything in temporary memory. That means you store it in an array first. We will talk about array later. We haven't talked about array in this series yet, so we will talk about array later. And then you write everything in array. In other words, it's your RAM lah. And then you pass everything to the spreadsheet at one time, not one by one. Okay, so the other 3 reasons here are not so significant, like screen updating. It is when what you will be having is that let me show you. Let me move this one to here. Okay, and this one we put it here. Right. So if I run this code again, if you note, observe this part, the Excel part, right? So let me delete, and you observe one more time. You observe from column A to cell A1 until other cell. So you see the 1 come out first, and then 2 3 4. The later numbers are quite fast, but you can observe that it is updating. It's like a real-time updating. So you off this screen updating, it will become faster. Your code will become faster because your code does, your CPU doesn't have to process the code and at the same time process your spreadsheet, right? So the VBA or the CPU only handle one part, and then after everything done, then only update this part. So it would be slightly faster. That means you can do screen updating. Or let me maximize it. So talking about the second one is application dot screen updating equal to false. False means I off the screen updating, then I on it back, right? So equal to true. Okay, now if I put it like this again, If I run the code one more time, you see it won't be updated until everything is done. Then it will be displayed at once. So this is screen updating. So usually this is better if, let's say, you are running a complicated code. Try to off the screen updating, and then let your Excel update after everything is done, so that you won't always see that Excel is not responding, and then you have to keep waiting, or you have to go for your lunch, forced to go lunch, right? You don't have this issue. For the third one, formula updating, the impact is getting slightly smaller. Not necessarily, it depends on your workbook. So you can off the formula updating, so that when you key in the value into column into your Excel spreadsheet, it won't recalculate the whole template, right? So this is calculating. So you can also off it if, let's say, your simulation doesn't need any recalculation, or it's not formula linked in Excel. So you off it, it will be slightly faster, unless you are like, for example, you have a model, you try to change the parameter and see what is the output, and from parameter to output, it is being calculated or modeled by Excel function. Then you cannot off your calculation option, right? So this one is over here. Formula, then your calculation option, you can change it to manual. So you change it to manual, that means when you run this code, it won't change. So let me demonstrate. If I have equal to this value plus 1, right? So I have a 1. If I put in a 1 here, it will become a 2. You see, one action become at least 2 action now, because I type in a 1, it's 1 action, but or I type in a 2, it is 1 action. Excel has to calculate this value. It depends on the formula. This formula is like 1 operation, so 1 action become 2 action. If this is complicated function, then it will become even worse. Okay, so if you off this thing, change to manual calculation, then you put in a 3, it won't be recalculated until you press F9, or you change to automatic calculation option. Okay, so unless you are doing these two, otherwise your number won't be updated. So my PC a bit slow. Okay, right. Let me change it back. Formula. So if I change it back, you see the number get updated. So imagine if you have 10,000, not 10,000, 1,000 of cell having these formulas, and then every time you change this one time, the 1,000 cell recalculates, and you change 10 times, then you are recalculating 10,000 cells. Each cell you have 2 operations, you have 20,000 operations for one simulation step. So that is actually very inefficient. So if you know that this thing does not depend on the numbers that you are simulating, then you off it, change it to manual. Okay, so when you change it to manual, you will see something like this again. So if I run the code, you see this one won't be updated until the last part. Then I enable back. Okay, so this is one way. Another way is you can also put in your calculation option inside the code. Okay, so if, let's say, you are not familiar with the codes, you can use record macro. So it is actually calculation option. So if you are not familiar, then you just record the macro and then you click OK, and then you go to formula. You just do this thing, change to manual, and then you change it back, then stop recording. Go back to your VBA. Under this module 1, you will see this part, right? Application.calculation, and having these 2 lines, then now you can actually put it here. Okay, so you are saying that, okay, now I off the screen, I off the calculation, I do the simulation, I on it back. Of course, in this example, having these 2 lines will cause your code to be less efficient, because you don't have any calculation in your workbook, right? So you don't really need these two lines. But if let's say your template has a very complicated formula link model, then you off it, you will see the significant change. Okay, so in this part I leave it like this first, okay, so that you know what we are doing. Declare variable, this one is quite minimal in new version of Excel. In old version of Excel, I mean every version also same thing. If you don't declare the variable, because in VBA that variable declaration is not compulsory. That means I can directly use, like for example this case, right? So I directly use I never define what is I. Okay, so in this case, what it will cause is that it will cause an issue where Excel will have to determine what is the value of I, or what is the data type of I, right? So Excel will have to see, okay, I'm using 1 to 10,000, so Excel know that I is an integer. Okay, so if you don't declare the variable, by default it is variant. I mean it is declared as variant. Variant means it can be anything. So these kind of things, Excel will have to do one more step to determine what data type you are using, so it will become less efficient. But in new version of Excel, this impact is very minimal, but it is still a very good practice to declare variable before you do the codes. So for me, I always declare the variables, because I want to make sure that I don't use any variable that is not defined. So I know what I'm typing. I reduce or minimize the probability of having a typo. Okay, so especially when you are writing a very complicated codes, it is very hard for you to trace where is the typo or mistake. So usually having the declared variable is actually better. Okay, and of course, more importantly, these are the few tips. You will have more tips if you search online, but these are the experience that I have, and this is basically the few things that is more significant. Okay, but more importantly is you don't write the code as if you are actually using Excel spreadsheet. That means you don't say, okay, if I do Excel, I click here and then I copy here, I paste here, and I do whatever things. So I just write exactly the same code into the VBA. It works, but it will be slow. Okay, so if you are doing this thing, you will notice your code is very slow or not efficient. Of course, as a beginner, writing the code as if we are using spreadsheet is very good, as in the sense that we learn how, or we have a feeling how the VBA is actually working, right? So you can actually use VBA to mimic what you are doing in Excel. Then you try to learn the code. Once you are familiar with VBA already, then you have to throw away this habit. Don't write the code as if you are using Excel spreadsheet again. So try not to do that. Okay, so some examples are like change worksheet. So like change worksheet is like over here. I click here and then click back. So this one takes a lot of time. If you are using code, then you are saying that like for example, like this worksheets. If you still remember, we can use sheet 1.select also. Okay, so sometimes if you are using macro recording, you will see these kind of things because you are actually on different worksheet. So when you are writing this way, you got to ask yourself, let's say if you have this code, let me put it here. Later we will improve this code one by one. Okay, so we will talk about this one later. Like copy paste value, we will use another example. Okay, and always consider when you are writing codes, you always consider this one is how you want to write the code, or before you write the code, you consider number of operations that you need in the for loop, for example, or in a calculation. Example is like this. Okay, so we know that you can calculate this one. 1 minus 1 is 0. In VBA, they will calculate one by one, right? So 1 minus 1 is 0, plus 1 is 1, minus 1 again is 0, so it is 0. So how many operations they are doing? 3 operations. If let's say you can simplify this one to become 0 plus 0, this one will become a 0 also. How many operations? 1 operation. Okay, and even best is if you know that this value is always 0, you don't need calculation, then this one is just a reading value, so it will be even faster. Okay, so when you are trying to do this thing, you always imagine how many operations you are actually doing. Then are those operations necessary, or either operation or action? So are they necessary? If not, then remove them. If you can simplify it, simplify it. Okay, so that is the idea. So now we move to the example. Let me remove this record macro first. This is what we have earlier. Okay, so having this one, now this is the first example, and we just want to know how efficient we are. So we need to know how long time this code is actually running. One way is you can always do something like this. Let's say as time equal to timer. Okay, and then you define this line is like read current time. Okay, and then you will have, let's say if you want, you call it as ET, no need lah, interval equal to round of timer is current time, don't forget, minus s time is when you read this timer, and round it to 2 decimal. So basically we are actually getting time interval in seconds. Okay, so now before end everything, then we say message box. We want to know completed in interval and how many seconds. Right, so let us test this code. You can run this one, and then you see this thing is running and taking 2.34 seconds. A bit small here, the font, but never mind, it is 2.34 seconds. And then if you go back to here, you see all the numbers are here. Okay, so this is like saying, okay, I put in 1 to 10,000, you take about 2.3 seconds. Still much faster than doing it one by one or by human hand, right? Let me delete this one. We try one more time. Okay, so we say that what are the 4 things that we can improve, right? So between workbook and VBA, this is one thing. Second thing is that this one, change worksheet, is also one thing. Okay, we first tackle this one, change worksheet. If you look at the code that we have here, you have this exe.select. Then we ask ourselves, when I want to pass a value I to this cell, do I have to make sure that this thing is selected? That means if let's say I go to Excel file, this one, I select worksheet 2 ex2, right? Go back here, I run the code. You see, after running the code, still about 2.3 seconds, I click OK. If I go back to Excel, this worksheet is selected. You see, just now we were at ex2. So this is selected because of this line. And is this line compulsory or necessary? So if it is not, then you remove it. Okay. So one thing is that you see, you are selecting this worksheet every time you go into the next I, right? So when I is 1, you select one time. When I is 2, you select the second time. I is 3, you select the third time. So first thing is that you can say, okay, instead of doing that, I put it outside because this is redundant or repetitive. I can just do it one time, run for the 10,000 times. So I move it outside. So this is the first concept. So you move all the repetitive steps outside the for loop, the loops, any loops. Okay. So that is the first thing that we can improve. Then we now try how long time we need. Let me delete this one. Okay. So instead of going that, you can actually insert a button. If let's say you want a button, then it should be computer a bit slow. Button, sorry, here. It should be over here. The form control is button. You can do something like this. Then you say put it as ex1. never mind. You should be able to assign the macro. Okay. Never mind. So let me just use the shape. I think we talked about this one in the previous video also, right? So how to assign your macro into the to one worksheet. This should be correct. Reference must be a macro sheet. Okay, never mind. I think this is the worksheet problem. Okay, ignore this one. So we don't use button here. Okay, so in this one, now we run one more time. Just now was about 2.3 seconds, right? So we run one more time. You see now it becomes 0.5 seconds. So you can see that the action of selecting actually costs a lot of time, use up a lot of time, right? So 2.3 becomes 0.5. So 1.8 second reduction. So one more time is that you can actually even omit this one. You don't really need this thing. You do not need to select EX1 worksheet, right? So if you are doing that, actually if you don't delete also never mind. I just want to ensure that the code passing the value correctly. So this is 0.5 seconds. Just now was 0.53, but you can't see the difference of it won't be 0.03 lah actually, because selecting one time it won't cost a lot. But if let's say you have a lot of codes doing the same thing, then you can save a lot of time. So you know that this thing is redundant. Okay, so what else we can improve? This is over here, this part is referring to this thing, right? Changing worksheet. Okay, now the second thing that you can see is that we have also screen updating and formula updating. Let me go back here. Let's say if we remove this formula updating, you won't see the impact lah over here because you don't have formula in the Excel file. But anyway, you can run it and see it should be still around. Okay, sorry. So this one become 1.28 second. You still see you will still see the difference over here. 1.28 second. Okay. So if you off this if you remove this screen updating just now, with these two lines we are actually off turn the screen updating into false, but removing these two lines means that we want the screen updating to be true. Then you will see it is actually a bit slow. Okay, but actually similar with this thing on. Okay, so 1.33, 1.28, so it's around there. If you change the calculation option to manual, then you reduce it to 0.5 seconds. So it's like a further reduction. Okay, but anyway, when you are doing that, you have to use this one. This is like turn CLC to manual. You have to use this thing carefully. Use carefully because make sure template formula or template formula, right, does not depend on simulation. Okay, otherwise when you run simulation, you turn off that, your number always get the same number. So this is not it is not that every time you can turn off or turn calculation into manual. Okay, so it depends on situation. So now we talk about this one first, between workbook and VBA. So how we are going to reduce the traffic between workbook and VBA. So this is one thing. You are saying that in VBA, then you have to go to Excel, pass a value 1, and then go back here, read the 2, pass to 2 here, and so on. So it takes a lot of time doing that changing window. Okay, so our objective or our way is to reduce this traffic. So best way is that you define this thing as an array. Okay, that means using array, I can actually store everything in, have I defined this one? So call it as ARR number. Okay, so ARN. Okay, so having this array defined in this way, that means you see from running I equal to 1 until 10,000, I store everything in my RAM, and then I pass everything at one time. So I don't have to move in and out like this. So I'm saying that, okay, now worksheets ex1 dot range. So over here you need to be slightly careful. We are using range A1 to A10,000. Okay, equal to not ARRN. So if you are doing that, because ARRN is one row, it is not one column, so it will paste everything in one row, 1 to 10,000 like this, and it is not column. Okay, so let me demonstrate. You will see, understand what I was saying. Okay, ARRN. So you got to define DIM ARRN as. Okay, so array means a variable that you can store more than one value. For example, 1 to 10,000. You are saying that, okay, now ARR1 is storing one value, ARR2 is one value until ARR 10,000. So this is one dimensional array. If you are familiar with array already, you can go and explore two-dimensional array and so on. So they are quite useful as integer. We know that this is integer 1 to 10,000. If you have more than 32,000 or 33,000, you use long. Okay, so run this code. You see, you get it in 0.03 second. Everything is done, but everything is 1. Why everything is 1? Because you are selecting 1 to 10,000. You paste ARRN. ARN is like 1, 2, 3 like this until 10,000. But because we selected column A, these are omitted, so you only have column A. Okay, so in this case, what you need to do is you need to transpose it. You use application dot transpose. Let me make it bigger so that you can see this one like this. Okay, so having this, then you will solve this issue. If you run this one, you see taking 0.04 second, you get everything done. So this is much better than you move the select outside, right? So with this code, now you can see that actually this whole thing become very efficient or very fast. So let me just copy this one and then remove all these unnecessary things. So you will see that this code is actually very clean. Right, so certain comments we should leave it, but at least you can see this code is actually very clean. So we define this variable, and then we say, okay, I don't want to update the screen, I don't want auto calculation. Then I define when is the time and so on, and then after everything done, you turn back automatic calculation and also screen updating. You have to turn back these two, otherwise when you do in like for example this one, when you type formula in your Excel, it might not be recalculating the whole worksheet. Okay, so this is one way. And then moving to the last thing here, declare variables, right? So declaring variable here, we say that if you don't declare, Excel will try to guess what you are trying to do. So it costs unnecessary steps. But of course, when you write code, it becomes a little bit easier for you because you don't have to declare, so faster. So efficiency depends on, you are looking at efficient in typing or efficient in running the code. So for me, I always look at how efficient the code is running, because writing the code efficiently is just a matter of habit or practice. Okay, so in order to make sure that your code always run, or in other words, you want to ensure that your code always run, it can run only when your variables are all defined. You do it like this. So this is a new module. Okay, we always use option explicit. That means using this option, you are saying that I must define all the variable or declare all the variable. Otherwise, this code is not running. Let's see if I run this code. Sorry, same name. You cannot use the same name. X1, EX2, and then this one should be EX3. So I run the code again. You see, okay, it doesn't work because this thing is not defined. So you have to define all the variable. And one good thing about option explicit is that it forces us to define everything. And one good thing is like for example, my own practice is that I want to define a start time, right? But usually you cannot have a white space in defining variable. So what I do is as time. So usually I put in a capital letter in between so that I know that this is a name. Like for example, interval. Interval as not integer but double. Okay, double means like decimal. Okay. So having this, then when I type the, for example, if during the time when I'm typing the code, right? So I won't use capital letter directly. I type in everything equal to timer. You see, when I press enter, just observe this line. When I press enter, the T become capitalized. So I know that, okay, no typo in my previous line, or at least no typo in variable. So that is my way of checking. So I don't have to, when you deal with, like maybe you have 20 modules and then each module you have 20 subroutine inside the code, then you will realize that this kind of practice really helps you a lot in saving time on how whether the variable is being typed correctly. Okay, so one more thing, I. So usually I will just if it is an index, I won't capitalize it. Okay, so I is just an index. Okay, so that is having the variable defined, and then you can run the code. Let me delete this one. Right, so you see somehow it becomes scientific formatting, so it's like 0.03 second. Okay, anyway, this is the main idea here, and now we move to like this is on how you can simplify the for loop and also some calculation. Now we move to one thing that you can actually see the difference also. So I add one module. We call this as the third one, ST DHIRD, third one, right? So I call it as sub copy one. So when you want to copy value and paste, right? Let's say if you are not sure, we still do in this worksheet. I can use developer tab, record the macro. I think now all of us should know. Okay, so I copy the whole column A1 to select A1 to A10,000, and then I Control C copy, right? And then I go to B1, and then go to home, paste special. I just paste the value, and then you see this dotted line means that copy paste selection is still on. I press escape to make this thing disappear. Go back here, stop recording. Okay, now we look at the code, module 1. So you see, this is like selection. So you can do this thing, but it won't be so efficient. But it depends on situation. Sometimes you do need this kind of code. So it is the current selection, and then it go down until the end. Select everything, copy, and then go to B1, and then I paste value. So these two lines are what we want, right? So let me copy and then go to here first. So what we can do is like for example, worksheet. Okay, so since we have been using that, so let me use sheet 1, just a revision, right? So we talk about this thing also. You can also refer to sheet 1, which is the counter here. Sheet 1 dot range A1 to A10,000. Okay, and what we want to do, we want to dot copy. We copy this range, and then sheet 1 dot range, we go to B1, right? And then we dot paste because I copy paste from the record macro just now. Okay, so this is a paste value, and then basically it's a paste value. Okay, so module 1 not needed anymore, so let me remove it first. We have cleaner this thing. Okay, so again we want the timer, so I just copy the timer. Copying the timer is for us to check the what, the efficiency of the code. Option explicit, right? So the moment you have this thing, then you will have to define everything as time, and then interval as double. Okay, and then you read the time, you copy paste everything, then you have interval, everything done. So let's run this code and see how. About 0.05 second, you can copy and paste. Okay, so let me delete this one, run again, 0.05 second. Okay, so 2 times we get around the same. Now we try one more time with another method. So let's call this thing as copy 2, and then what we are trying to do now is not to say copy and then go there paste, right? So this line is that we select this one, we right click copy, go to B1, right click paste special. So that is something like this, something what we are doing. Okay, so now what we want to do is actually some a little bit different. We need something called dot value equal to this one, and we directly pass the value here in this way. So you see the code become cleaner, and also it will be actually faster. 0.039 second of 0.04. So of course this simple example you won't see the difference, but if you copy paste a lot in a for loop or in anything, you will see the difference. So this difference is like 0.05 second to become 0.04 second. So it's an improvement of 20%, although the difference is not noticeable by human's eye, but the impact is actually there. Okay, so this is how you can avoid this thing also, copy paste value. Okay, so this is one of the way why we don't do this thing. So when you write your code, try not to write as if you are using Excel spreadsheet. So you always think, are the codes or are those lines necessary? Okay, so we always consider number of operation, number of necessary action. So if it is not necessary, remove that, change it to a more efficient one. Okay, and as a conclusion, if you are using this template or you are developing a template for at your work to be shared between a team, so my suggestion is that you try not to over complicated your model. That means as a beginner, when I know how to use VBA, we feel very excited. We try to do everything in VBA, and sort of like we can demonstrate that we know how to do coding. But in fact, VBA is not a very efficient code. Okay, so VBA is not a very full-fledged as programming language lah. So but anyway, not very efficient programming language. Okay, so it is not a very efficient programming language. So when you are using VBA, you have to keep in mind one thing is that VBA, we are using this because it is easier for us to use together with the Excel model or Excel template. If you are totally not using the Excel template, you are using just VBA, might as well we directly use other language like C, C++ or Python. Okay, so in this sense, when we are doing this way, so we know that okay, if we are sharing the Excel template with other colleagues who are not familiar with VBA, we try to use Excel to complete everything without VBA. It is actually doable. Like for example, simulation, you can use Excel to do simulation, and without or even with just minimal VBA. So try not to overcomplicate your model so that it is easier to use and easier to be understood by your colleagues. Okay, so only use VBA when necessary, and always ask yourself what advantage or advantages you will get if you are using VBA. So that is the main idea here. Of course, we are still sharing this VBA. We are not saying that VBA is not good, but we don't overvalue this VBA. Okay, so this is the end of this video. Thanks for watching, and then we discuss about what are the things. Okay, in the next series we are going to talk about some other advanced, not to say advanced, but intermediate topics, like probably message box, input box, and so on. Okay, so we stop here, and I see you in next video.